they found her after 20 years, but she wasn't alone in the forest. Welcome back to Cold Shadows YT, where the wilderness keeps its darkest secrets. Tonight's story will make you question everything you think you know about survival. Because sometimes, the most terrifying thing isn't what the forest takes from you. It's what it gives you in return. The image that changed everything. Wildlife photographer Jake Morrison thought he was documenting elk migration patterns when he checked his trail camera on that October morning in 2023. Instead, he found evidence of something impossible. A teenage girl wearing a red Riverside High varsity jacket with a distinctive Golden Eagle logo, the exact same jacket that 15-year-old Sophia Chen had worn when she vanished with her family 20 years earlier. The timestamp read 5:47 a.m. The figure stood motionless between two towering pines, staring directly into the camera lens with an intensity that made Jake's blood run cold. But it was the second figure, barely visible in the shadows behind her, that would haunt his dreams forever. As Cold Shadows YT has documented in previous cases, the forests of the Pacific Northwest have swallowed entire families without explanation. But the Chen family disappearance was different. It wasn't just about people who went missing. It was about what they became while they were gone. Chapter 1. The Perfect Family's Last Day, June 15, 2003, Olympic National Forest, Washington. The morning mist clung to the forest floor like whispered secrets, as the Chen family loaded their silver Toyota 4Runner for what would be their final camping trip. Dr. Michael Chen, a respected pediatric surgeon from Seattle, carefully secured the camping gear while his wife, Linda, a high school English teacher, double-checked their supplies list with characteristic precision. Their children, Sophia, 15, and her younger brother Alex, 12, bounced with excitement as they prepared for a week-long adventure in the Olympic wilderness. Sophia wore her prized Riverside High varsity jacket, earned through 3 years of competitive debate. Alex clutched his new digital camera, eager to photograph whatever wildlife they might encounter. The Chen family represented the American dream, successful, close-knit, active in their community. Dr. Chen had recently been featured in Seattle Magazine for his volunteer work with underprivileged children. Linda had won a state award for innovative teaching methods. They were the last family anyone would expect to simply vanish. At 8:30 a.m., they stopped at the Wilderness Access Station where Ranger Patricia Wells logged their entry. The family appeared cheerful and well-prepared, with enough supplies for a week-long backcountry hiking trip. Linda mentioned they planned to explore some of the more remote trails away from the typical tourist areas. "We want the kids to experience real wilderness," Linda told Ranger Wells. "Somewhere they can disconnect from technology and really connect with nature." Those were the last words anyone heard from Linda Chen. The family's planned return date was June 22nd, when they failed to check out, and when Dr. Chen missed his scheduled surgeries on Monday, June 23rd, the hospital contacted authorities. By Tuesday, a full-scale search and rescue operation was underway. What they found defied explanation. Chapter 2. The Discovery That Made No Sense. The Toyota 4Runner was located exactly where the Chen family had parked it, at the terminus of Forest Road 2318, a remote access point leading to several backcountry trails. The vehicle was locked, windows up, with no signs of forced entry or struggle. Inside, searchers found something disturbing. All of the family's personal belongings were still there. Wallets, cell phones, extra clothing, medical supplies, and most puzzling of all, their hiking packs, fully loaded and ready to go. Cold Shadows YT has obtained exclusive access to the original search records, revealing details that were never made public. The condition of the vehicle suggested the family had never actually begun their hiking trip. More strange details emerged. The keys were still in Dr. Chen's jacket pocket inside the car. Linda's purse sat open on the front seat with cash and credit cards untouched. Alex's new camera contained only photos from their drive to the forest, nothing from any hiking activities. But the most unsettling discovery was found on the driver's seat, Sophia's cell phone displaying a half-typed text message that was never sent. "Something's wrong with the trail. We shouldn't have come." The message cut off mid-sentence, as if she'd been interrupted while typing. Search teams immediately focused on the area around the parking location. Using dogs, helicopters, and ground crews, they covered a 15-mile radius over the next 3 weeks. They found no footprints, no clothing fragments, no campsites, no trace that the Chen family had ever left their vehicle. It was as if they had been absorbed by the forest itself. Chapter 3. 20 Years of Silence. Detective Sarah Martinez had been working cold cases for 5 years when the Chen file landed on her desk in early 2023. What struck her immediately wasn't what was in the file, it was what was missing. The original investigation had been thorough but conventional. Searches, interviews, background checks, financial records, all the standard procedures for a missing persons case. But there were gaps, inconsistencies that suggested the investigators had missed something crucial. The Chen case had been closed in 2008 as missing persons, presumed deceased. But as Cold Shadows YT has learned through our investigation, several pieces of evidence were either overlooked or deliberately excluded from the official record. Sarah's interest was personal as well as professional. Her own sister had been friends with Sophia Chen at Riverside High. She remembered the shock that had rippled through their community when the family disappeared, and how quickly everyone had seemed to accept the official explanation of a tragic hiking accident. But Sarah had never forgotten something her sister had told her shortly after the disappearance. Sophia had been acting weird for weeks before they left. She kept talking about having strange dreams about the forest, like something was calling her there. When Jake Morrison's trail camera photos surfaced, Sarah knew this case was far from over. Chapter 4. The Photographer's Discovery. Jake Morrison had been photographing wildlife in the Olympic forests for over a decade, but he'd never captured anything like the image that appeared on his trail camera's memory card that October morning. The figure in the red varsity jacket stood with an unnatural stillness, head tilted slightly as if listening to something beyond human hearing. But it was the enhancement software that revealed the truly disturbing details. Using advanced image analysis techniques, investigators were able to extract information from the photograph that wasn't visible to the naked eye. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about the Chen family disappearance. The jacket was unmistakably Sophia's, not just similar, but identical down to a small tear in the left sleeve that had been documented in family photos. The figure wearing it appeared to be the right height and build for a teenage girl. But something about the posture was wrong. Too rigid, too alert. And then there was the second figure. Barely visible in the deep shadows behind the trees, motion blur analysis revealed the outline of someone, or something, much larger. The figure appeared to be crouched, watching the girl in the jacket with predatory focus. Jake immediately contacted the authorities, but he also made copies of everything. Years of documenting wildlife had taught him that evidence could disappear, especially when it raised uncomfortable questions. Chapter 5. The search renewed. Within 48 hours of Jake's report, a joint task force of local police, state investigators, and federal agents descended on the Olympic National Forest. This wasn't just about a missing family anymore. If Sophia Chen was alive after 20 years, it meant someone had been holding her in the wilderness for 2 decades. The search centered on a 50-square-mile area around where Jake's camera had been positioned. Using ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, and cadaver dogs, they began the systematic process of searching terrain that had been considered thoroughly explored 20 years earlier. What they found in those forests would rewrite the understanding of what had happened to the Chen family, and reveal a truth more disturbing than anyone had imagined. On the 3rd day of searching, teams discovered something that had been missed in the original investigation. A series of caves and underground passages that weren't marked on any official surveys. The entrances were so well concealed that they would be invisible to anyone not specifically looking for them. Inside the largest cave, investigators found evidence of long-term habitation. Makeshift furniture constructed from forest materials, crude tools, and scattered throughout the underground chambers, personal items belonging to the Chen family, but items that showed signs of being used and maintained over many years. Most disturbing of all was what they found in the deepest chamber. Carefully preserved clothing belonging to each family member, laid out as if someone was maintaining a shrine to them. Chapter 6. The Girl Who Couldn't Be Found. As news of the renewed search spread, reports began flooding in from across the Pacific Northwest. Hikers, campers, and residents of remote communities claimed to have seen a young woman in a red jacket over the past several years. Always alone, always at a distance, always fleeing when approached. A park ranger in Olympic National Park reported that maintenance workers had occasionally found evidence of someone living rough in the backcountry, improvised shelters, food caches, signs that someone was surviving off the land with impressive skill. These sightings painted a picture of someone who had not just survived in the wilderness for 2 decades, but had thrived, adapting to a life that no civilized person should have been able to endure. But the most significant lead came from an unexpected source, Dr. Emily Voss, a wildlife biologist who had been studying wolf behavior in the region. She had been reviewing years of trail camera footage for her research when she began noticing recurring anomalies, human figures appearing in locations where no humans should have been able to survive. "I've been tracking these sightings for 3 years," Dr. Voss told investigators. "At first I thought it was just one person, but the movement patterns suggest at least 2 individuals, possibly more. They're covering territories that would require intimate knowledge of the forest systems, knowledge that would take decades to acquire." The implication was chilling. Not only had someone survived in the Olympic wilderness for 20 years, but they had created an entire hidden society in the forest. Chapter 7. The Underground Network. The cave system discovered by search teams proved to be far more extensive than initially realized. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a network of natural and modified chambers spanning several square miles, connected by passages that showed signs of deliberate excavation and maintenance. In these underground spaces, investigators found evidence of a sophisticated survival operation. Workshops for creating tools and clothing, food storage areas stocked with preserved game and foraged plants, and living spaces that had been occupied for years. But it was the personal artifacts they found that revealed the true horror of what had happened to the Chen family. In one chamber, they discovered Alex's camera, the same one he'd been carrying 20 years earlier. The memory card contained hundreds of photos spanning 2 decades, documenting the family's survival in the forest. The images showed the Chen family aging over time, but also changing in ways that suggested profound psychological transformation. The early photos showed Dr. Chen and Linda working together to build shelters and gather food. But as the years progressed, their expressions became increasingly haunted. They appeared to be living in constant fear of something, or someone. Sophia appeared in many of the images, wearing her red jacket in photo after photo, year after year. But her face showed the same gradual transformation from a normal teenager to someone whose eyes held knowledge no child should possess. Alex appeared in fewer and fewer photos as time went on. The last image of him was dated 7 years after their disappearance, showing a young man who looked decades older than his chronological age, sitting alone in one of the cave chambers with a 1,000-yard stare. Chapter 8. The Thing in the Forest. Among Alex's photographs was a series that chilled investigators to the bone. Taken with telephoto settings from concealed positions, they showed something moving through the forest, something that walked upright like a human, but moved with an inhuman fluidity. The creature appeared in dozens of photos over the years, always at a distance, always partially obscured by trees and shadows. But the progression of images suggested it was hunting the Chen family, tracking them through the forest with patient persistence. Analysis of these photographs by wildlife experts and forensic specialists revealed details that challenged conventional understanding of what could exist in the Pacific Northwest wilderness. The creature was large, estimated at over 7 feet tall, with long arms and a gait that suggested it was equally comfortable moving on 2 legs or 4. Most disturbing were the photos that showed it examining the Chen family's campsites, as if studying their behavior and adapting its hunting strategies accordingly. Dr. Voss, the wildlife biologist, was brought in to analyze the creature photos. Her conclusion was both professional and terrifying. This is not a known species. The locomotion patterns, the apparent intelligence, the hunting behaviors, none of it matches any documented North American wildlife. Whatever this is, it's been using the Olympic forest as its territory for at least 20 years. The final photo in Alex's camera showed the creature much closer than in any previous image. It was standing just outside one of the cave entrances, as if it had finally located the family's hiding places. The date stamp showed this photo was taken only 3 months before Jake Morrison captured his trail camera image of Sophia. Chapter 9. The Confrontation. As the investigation intensified, a pattern emerged from witness reports and trail camera data. The sightings of Sophia were always in the same general area, a remote section of the Olympic forest that had been designated as a wilderness preserve, off-limits to most human activity. Detective Martinez assembled a specialized team for what she knew could be a dangerous encounter. If Sophia Chen was still alive after 20 years in the forest, there was no telling how she might react to contact with civilization. The team included survival experts, psychologists specializing in trauma, and law enforcement officers trained in wilderness operations. What they found in those forests would test every aspect of their training. Following the trail of sightings and evidence, the team established a base camp in the area where Jake's camera had captured the red jacket image. Using thermal imaging and motion sensors, they began the systematic process of tracking someone who had spent 2 decades learning to avoid detection. On the 3rd night, their sensors detected movement. Multiple figures were approaching the camp with a stealth that suggested intimate knowledge of the forest. The team prepared for contact, but what emerged from the darkness was beyond anything they had anticipated. Sophia Chen walked into the circle of their campfire as if she had been expecting them. She still wore the red Riverside High jacket, now patched and weathered, but unmistakably the same garment she'd worn 20 years earlier. Her dark hair hung past her shoulders, and her face showed the lean hardness of someone who had survived impossible conditions. But it was her eyes that stopped the investigators cold. They held an awareness, an intelligence that seemed both human and something else entirely. "You shouldn't have come here," she said in a voice that carried the authority of someone who had become something more than human. "It's not safe." Chapter 10. The Truth Revealed. Over the course of 3 days, Sophia Chen told investigators a story that redefined their understanding of survival, adaptation, and the thin line between civilization and wilderness. The Chen family hadn't planned to disappear, she explained. On their first day in the forest, something had begun hunting them, the creature that Alex had photographed over the years. It had driven them deeper and deeper into the wilderness, away from all the normal hiking trails and camping areas. What Sophia described challenged conventional wisdom about human survival in extreme conditions. But the physical evidence of the cave system, the photographs, and her own presence after 20 years confirmed the impossible truth. "It wasn't trying to kill us," Sophia explained. "It was studying us, learning from us. For the first few years we thought we were hiding from it. Then we realized it was letting us survive because it wanted to understand how humans adapt." The family had developed survival skills that bordered on the supernatural. They could move through the forest without leaving tracks, find food sources that would be invisible to trained survivalists, and sense the creature's presence long before it became visible. But the psychological toll had been devastating. Dr. Chen had suffered a complete mental breakdown after 5 years in the forest. Linda had retreated into a catatonic state that lasted for months at a time. Alex had simply vanished during his 18th year. Sophia believed the creature had finally claimed him. "I'm the only one left," she said with a matter-of-fact tone that was more disturbing than any display of emotion. "And I can't leave. It won't let me." Try Chapter 11. The Choice. As Sophia spoke, the investigators became aware that they were being watched. Motion sensors around their camp detected multiple figures moving in the forest, circling their position with military precision. The creature had evolved, Sophia explained. 20 years of contact with humans had changed it, made it smarter, more capable of complex planning and strategy. It had learned to work with others of its kind, creating a network of predators that controlled vast areas of the wilderness. The implications were staggering. The Pacific Northwest forests might harbor an entire ecosystem of these creatures, unknown to science and actively hostile to human presence. "You can try to take me back to your world," Sophia told Detective Martinez. "But it will follow. It's been patient for 20 years, but if you remove me from the forest, it will come to find me, and it won't be subtle about it." The investigators faced an impossible choice. Leave Sophia in the forest, where she had somehow survived for 2 decades, or remove her and potentially expose civilization to something it was not prepared to face. The decision was made for them when their motion sensors detected the creatures moving closer. In the pre-dawn darkness, glowing eyes became visible in the tree line. The things that had hunted the Chen family for 20 years had finally decided to end the game. Chapter 12. The Escape. What followed was a retreat that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. As the investigation team attempted to evacuate with Sophia, the forest erupted in sounds that no earthly creature should have been able to make. Howls that seemed to come from everywhere at once, crashing through the underbrush that suggested things of enormous size moving at impossible speeds. Sophia moved through the chaos with fluid grace, guiding the investigators along paths that would have been invisible to anyone else. "This is what I've been doing for 20 years, she said, as they ran through the darkness, "learning their patterns so I could stay one step ahead." The evacuation took 14 hours of continuous movement through terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers. 3 members of the investigation team were injured, and all reported psychological effects that would require ongoing treatment. They finally reached civilization as the sun set on their 2nd day of flight. Sophia stood at the forest edge, looking back at the darkness that had been her home for 2 decades. "This isn't over," she told Detective Martinez. "By bringing me out, you've changed the rules of a game that's been going on since before humans built cities. They'll adapt. They always do." As if to confirm her words, sounds echoed from the deep forest. Not animal sounds, but something that suggested intelligence, communication, planning. Chapter 13. The Aftermath. Sophia Chen's return to civilization was kept classified at the highest levels of government. The official story was that remains had been found confirming the death of the Chen family 20 years earlier, a tragic hiking accident with no survivors. But Sophia was alive, and her presence raised questions that no one in authority wanted to answer publicly. What had happened to her family? What were the creatures that had hunted them? And most disturbing of all, how many other families might have suffered similar fates in America's vast wilderness areas? Cold Shadows. YT has obtained documents through FOIA requests showing that Sophia's case triggered a classified review of missing persons reports from wilderness areas across the Pacific Northwest. What they found suggested the Chen family was not an isolated incident. Sophia was placed in a secure facility where specialists attempted to help her readjust to human society. But after 20 years in the forest, she had become something that civilization couldn't easily accommodate. Her sensory awareness, survival instincts, and psychological adaptations made normal human interaction nearly impossible. More troubling were the reports from the facility's security staff. Motion sensors detected unauthorized movement around the building at night. Trail cameras positioned in nearby woods captured images of large figures watching the facility from the tree line. The creatures hadn't given up. They were learning to operate in proximity to human civilization, adapting their hunting strategies to include urban environments. Chapter 14. The Warning. 6 months after her rescue, Sophia Chen requested a meeting with Detective Martinez. What she shared during that conversation would become one of the most closely guarded secrets in federal law enforcement. "They're not just animals," Sophia explained. 20 years ago, they were something like Bigfoot, primitive, instinct-driven, territorial, but not particularly intelligent. But contact with my family changed them. They learned from us, watched us problem solve, observed our tool use, studied our social behaviors. The creatures had undergone an accelerated evolution, driven by their interaction with human intelligence. They had developed language, basic technology, and most dangerous of all, the ability to plan complex operations involving multiple individuals. The transformation of these creatures from primitive forest dwellers to something approaching human-level intelligence represents one of the most significant evolutionary leaps ever documented. But the documentation remains classified, hidden from scientific study by national security concerns. "They're preparing for something," Sophia warned. "For 20 years, they've been content to stay in the deep wilderness, taking the occasional hiker or camper. But that's changing. They're getting bolder, moving closer to populated areas, and they're not hunting for food anymore. They're hunting for knowledge." The implication was clear. Humanity might be facing the emergence of a rival intelligence, one that had learned to mimic and potentially surpass human capabilities while maintaining the physical advantages of apex predators. Chapter 15. The Network Exposed. Following Sophia's warnings, federal investigators began a comprehensive review of wilderness disappearances dating back 50 years. Using advanced data analysis and pattern recognition software, they identified clusters of vanishings that suggested systematic predation by intelligent agents. The results were terrifying. Over 400 unexplained disappearances in wilderness areas across the Pacific Northwest, with a clear pattern of escalation over the past 2 decades. The creatures weren't just taking isolated individuals. They were conducting what appeared to be systematic research on human behavior and capabilities. Cold Shadows YT has mapped these disappearances and identified clear territorial patterns that suggest multiple groups of creatures operating with coordinated intelligence across state and national boundaries. More disturbing was the discovery that some of the missing persons had been taken not randomly, but based on specific skill sets. Engineers, doctors, teachers, military personnel. The creatures appeared to be selecting humans based on the knowledge they could provide. The Chen family hadn't been random victims. Dr. Chen's medical knowledge, Linda's educational background, and the children's adaptability had made them ideal subjects for a 20-year experiment in human-creature interaction. "We weren't just surviving in the forest," Sophia later explained. "We were teaching them. Every problem we solved, every tool we made, every adaptation we developed, they were watching and learning. By the time I realized what was happening, it was too late to stop it." Chapter 16. The Current Threat Today. Sophia Chen lives under federal protection in a location that remains classified. Her psychological profile shows adaptations that are both remarkable and disturbing. Enhanced sensory perception, intuitive understanding of natural systems, and survival instincts that border on prescient. But she also exhibits signs of post-traumatic stress that may never fully heal. 20 years of constant vigilance, of living as prey to creatures that were always learning and adapting, have left psychological scars that challenge conventional therapy. More concerning are the reports from her protective detail. Despite maximum security protocols, evidence suggests that the creatures continue to monitor her location. They have not given up their interest in their former captive. "They're still out there," Sophia warns anyone who will listen. "And they're still learning. Every news report about human technology, every documentary about human society, they're absorbing it all. They're preparing for something bigger than anyone wants to admit." Recent satellite imagery of the Olympic National Forest has detected thermal anomalies consistent with large-scale construction projects in areas that should contain only wilderness. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed extensive underground networks that dwarf the cave system where the Chen family survived. The creatures aren't just adapting to human presence, they are building infrastructure that suggests preparation for large-scale operations. Epilogue: The Forest Remembers. As we conclude this investigation for Cold Shadows YT, it's important to understand that the Sophia Chen case represents just the beginning of a much larger story. The creatures that held her family for 20 years haven't disappeared. They've evolved. Federal authorities now maintain constant surveillance of wilderness areas where similar disappearances have occurred. Search and rescue protocols have been quietly updated to include procedures for encounters with non-standard wildlife. Park rangers receive specialized training that they're forbidden from discussing publicly. But the most disturbing aspect of this case is not what happened to the Chen family. It's what their 20-year captivity may have unleashed on the world. Sophia Chen's survival came at a cost that humanity is only beginning to understand. In adapting to life in the forest, in teaching her family's captors the complexities of human intelligence and behavior, she may have created something that poses an existential threat to civilization itself. The forests of the Pacific Northwest hold secrets that challenge our understanding of evolution, intelligence, and humanity's place in the natural world. The creatures that emerge from those forests in the coming years may be unlike anything we've ever encountered. But there's one thing Sophia Chen wants everyone to remember. When you're hiking in the deep woods, when you feel like you're being watched, when something doesn't feel right, trust those instincts. Because after 20 years with them, I can tell you, they're always learning, they're always adapting, and they're never going to stop hunting. The red jacket that Sophia wore for 2 decades in the forest now hangs in a secured evidence locker. But sometimes, on foggy mornings in the Olympic wilderness, hikers report seeing a figure in red standing among the trees, watching, waiting, as if the forest itself has become something that remembers. Thank you for joining Cold Shadows YT for this investigation. Remember, the wilderness is vast, and we're still learning what calls it home. If you've had unexplained encounters in wilderness areas, please contact the National Park Service's anonymous reporting line. Some secrets are too dangerous to keep silent. Subscribe to Cold Shadows YT for more investigations into the mysteries that challenge our understanding of the natural world. And remember, sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones that learn from their prey. Disclaimer. This story is a work of investigative fiction created for Cold Shadows YT. While inspired by real missing persons cases and unexplained wilderness phenomena, all names, locations, and specific details are fictional. If you have information about missing persons in wilderness areas, please contact local authorities or the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System.